live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and blasttheradio.com. This is the Lowell Green Show. The number to call and be heard around the world is 613-413-2217. Or email Lowell at blasttheradio.com. And now, here is Lowell Green.
Thank you, John. So, kids going back to school Monday. Thank God. I say hallelujah. What do you say, folks? I got to be honest. I never understood why, at least in this city, I mean, we're not Toronto here, you know. Most of our people have been vaccinated, and let's be honest. I mean, our hospitals are nowhere near being overloaded in this city with COVID. I mean, what do we got? 5, 6 people in ICU? Got 80 ICU units, 4 hospitals, and I think we have 5 or 6 people in ICU with COVID right now. And I don't know how many, in like 30 or 40, but you never know, because they're finally being honest with us and telling us that somewhere between 40 and 50% of people that they list as being in hospital with COVID actually are in hospital for something else and just happen to have COVID. But they wouldn't be in hospital with COVID. They're there for a broken leg, broken hip, broken head, whatever it is. And as an ancillary issue, they have COVID. So in many cases, the numbers they're giving you from hospitals are vastly inflated. So let's get that over with. So having said this, I never understood why we had to close hospitals. As a matter of fact, given the low rate of infections and serious illness in our hospitals, I never understood why we had to close businesses, at least not with Omicron. I understood it before with Delta. It was much more dangerous. But, I mean, I don't get it. But at any rate, kids going back to school Monday, they say that that's a hard yes, that they're not going to change their minds, that yes, they are going to go back. And interestingly enough, I'm getting mixed messages from the teachers. Number one, the teachers union, a couple of weeks ago, demanded that the schools not be open. They said it was just too dangerous. So when Doug Ford said, okay, we'll delay the opening by 2 weeks, then the teachers union jumped in again and was criticizing Ford for that. So I don't know where the teachers union stands on this. But one of the things that I'm a little surprised is there's apparently still a good number of parents, and maybe it's understandable, that is a little bit reluctant, a little bit worried. But I mean, if you look at the data, folks, there's really no justification, certainly not with Omicron, to close our schools. First of all, very few kids are becoming very ill at all. I mean, there's rare exceptions. There's a risk, but I mean, there's a risk in everything. I mean, hell's bells, there's a risk of getting out of bed in the morning. We have a pretty close relative who broke his ankle stepping out of bed. So, and you know, you can break your leg getting in and out of the bathtub. Kids break their arms climbing trees and playing soccer and all the rest of it. So there's a risk in everything. There's a risk in getting on a school bus, and you can't cocoon children. So as I say, I personally I'm absolutely thrilled that they're finally going back to school. I think our kids have suffered enough in this. So have we, for that matter. But I'm happy. I'd like to know what your feelings are. On another issue, totally different, Ontario has decided to drop a couple of the tests involved in granting driving licenses. So no more will you be tested on parallel parking. I mean, I don't know how, if you ever watch in a parking lot, people, particularly, I'm sorry to say it, but women trying to parallel park.
I can hear your wife in the background.
Yeah, my wife, Debbie is piping up. She parallel parks quite well. But one of her closest friends, who's also a woman, is shocked to see her doing this. But what I'm saying is that if you watch most people, men and women, trying to parallel park, you wonder, how the hell do they ever pass the test? And the other test that they're scrapping apparently is the 3-point turn. I don't know how you feel about this, whether this is important. I'm going to be honest with you. I never felt that the driving testing was all that important. And the reason for that is, if you look at the data, you'll find out that almost all accidents are not caused from people who don't know the rules of the road. They're caused by people who know the rules of the road but choose not to abide by them, or they forget. I mean, everybody knows you got to stop for a red light, right? But about 1/4 of all traffic accidents in the province of Ontario are caused by people, you guessed it, running a red light. They know they're supposed to stop. I mean, everybody knows that you should signal a turn. But, what, 10, 15, 20%, sometimes it's more than that, they don't bother signaling a turn. They know they're supposed to. And that's another major cause of accidents. But they just don't bother. These people, in many cases, they're selfish, they're ignorant, they don't care about other people. They'll just I don't need to follow the rule. I'm special. I don't need to follow the rules of the road. Let's be very honest. Everybody knows what the speed limit is. They're posted everywhere. 90%, including myself, speed. We do. Come on. You try doing 100K on the Queensway, unless it's really jammed. And I mean, you got cars coming at you from the right, coming from you the left. They're trying to pass you overhead, sideways, upside down, all around. Come on, let's be honest. So my feeling has always been that it's not that people don't know the rules of the road that causes accidents. It's because they choose not to follow them. Anybody, any thoughts on that? My wife is concerned because they've dropped those 2 tests. I can't get really all that upset. How about you, folks? Any concern about any of that? On another issue, and by the way, John, just go through again how people can get in touch
Sure.
with us.
Happy to. Especially phone calls. We love phone calls, and the same number applies for text. So 613-413-2217. If you're on Facebook, you can post your comments where you normally do. We'll pop them up on the screen. Same thing if you're watching on YouTube, on Twitter, and on Twitch. All of our social media channels, etc., are linked at lowellgreen.com or blasttheradio.com/lowellgreen.
And by the way, John, do you read all of them, or sometimes we don't have a chance to read all of the texts?
No, but, and I pop as many up on the screen as I can, and I'm, while I'm doing that, I'm cutting and pasting onto a notepad so I can read them to you. And they don't all get read; they all get seen, though.
One of the things that I find very interesting, and if you do have a message, text or phone call or whatever, we have people essentially all around the world listening to this program. John, just go through. Do you have the facts and figures in front of you there as to the listenership? I mean, we have Russia. We have listeners in Russia. Yep. We've got lots of listeners in the United States, right across Canada. It's quite surprising.
Pulling them up for you right now, as a matter of fact, sir. So
this is really interesting. Modern technology when it works.
Yeah, I mean, this is podcast listenership, right? So it'll tell me, male demographic, female demographic, if they've put that into the phone. So 91% of your audience, Lowell, is here in Canada.
Good.
5% in the U.S.
Okay.
Followed by India,
the
United Arab Emirates.
Okay.
Jamaica, man.
Jamaica, man.
Yep. United Kingdom, Chile, Germany, Mexico, and Russia, South Korea, Cuba, Sweden, Libya, Italy, Ireland, Taiwan, the Netherlands, France, Portugal, Belgium, Japan, Brazil, Denmark, Bolivia, Saudi Arabia, and Iran. That is quite the coverage map. My goodness. So here we go.
Talking about Jamaica.
Yeah.
Do you know what I could use right now, man? A red stripe. Do you know what a red stripe is?
That's their beer, isn't it?
Yes. I love in the Bahamas, I love Calic. Do you know why they call it, by the way, the beer Calic in the Bahamas?
No.
Because, there's one of the most famous events in the Bahamas is the Junkanoo Parade. This is really something. Almost everybody in the Bahamas takes part on New Year's Eve, okay? The parade lasts about 4 hours. They've got, but a lot of them have little things with their fingers, and they go click, click, click. It's a metal thing that click. Remember as a kid you used to have those? And so one of the sounds, they've got, music and all the rest of it and
Yeah,
dancing. Yeah, but they've got these things clicking, and that's what they named the beer after. Go ahead,
There you
John.
go.
Sorry.
That's okay. By the way, 69% of your audience is male, 23% female, 9% not specified.
That's one of the great dilemmas of talk radio everywhere in the world. The audience is almost always predominantly male,
Interesting.
and it's one of the concerns that I have. Uh, we say that we need more women in politics and more women involved, but the fact of the matter is, and it's evidenced by talk radio, that the majority of, well, how do I say this without offending everybody?
You can't.
There aren't as many women. Sorry, the percentage of women who are interested in current events,
Yep.
Worldwide events, is not as high as it is with men. I'm sorry, but these facts and figures are borne out everywhere.
Well,
Maybe it's because women have other responsibilities. I don't know what it is, but go ahead.
Or they're more efficient, I guess, in how they digest the the daily political stuff. But no, I mean, the evidence is right there before me. I mean, it's a 70, well, let's say 70-30 split, really. If we lump that 9% in with the females, just to give them the benefit of the doubt,
Yeah.
It's a 70-30
At
split.
any rate, I remember when I was doing the show for something like 50 some odd years at CFRA, I would very often beg women, please, we need more women taking part. We want more women in politics. We want more women involved. And one of the great things is that when women do get involved, I think in many cases they do a better job than men. It's just that for whatever reason, not as many women do get involved in current events, etc. Let's move on before somebody
And
shoots
what blows
me
my
on this.
mind? Well, yeah, but here's what blows my mind. Most of the comments seem to come from women. So our real-time comments on Facebook, on YouTube, and Twitch, etc. I would say the numbers are probably flip-flopped. I would say 70% of the people commenting on the live show are female.
Good show.
Yeah.
John, let's hear a few.
All right, here we go. Joshua says a CTV poll says 37% of parents will not return their children to school, even accounting for extenuating circumstances, immune compromised children or relatives, etc. That number seems high. Tony says, you're finally seeing the light here. Lowell. Darlene says, ridiculous. This virus is rapid. I had it. No fun. Tina Marie says, I broke my tailbone falling into a chair. Chrissy says, makes me wonder how many parents will keep their kids home instead of letting them go.
No, but here, before we go further, this happens frequently. My question is, how do you feel about it? Don't tell me how others feel. I'd like to know whether you think it's a good idea to have the children back in school. Don't tell me what other people are saying. I want to know what you have to say about it. Do you agree with them going back to school, or are you concerned? And if so, what are your concerns? Go ahead, John.
Jean-Francois says, Margaret Thatcher, best leader ever. There you go.
Yeah, she was. There's no question.
Yep. Ann says, what kills me are the number of lazy-ass people who do not signal. You would fail your test if you didn't signal while taking it. It's a safety issue for others to know what you're about to do, and signals them perhaps slow down if they're following you too closely. I always signal.
Absolutely. What I heard one time, sorry, I heard one time from someone, and she was dead serious. She said, I never signal. She said, you know why? I said, no, why? She says, because other people don't need to know what I'm doing. It's my business, what I'm going to do,
Okay.
and I will not say. And she was deadly serious. This was her right to do whatever she wanted and didn't have to alert other people. She said, they have no right to know what I'm going to do. Okay.
Oh,
go ahead, John.
I hear it all the time. I drive less than a kilometer to and from my, where I drop my wife off for work every single day. And the excuses I hear from people, there's a do not enter sign at the plaza she works at. Oh, that only applies when the stores are open. Well, there's a 24-hour shoppers here.
I know.
Just make it up as you go along. Comment at 613-413-2217. Person texts in to say some new cars can even parallel park themselves, but still they should test for it.
Okay.
My niece just got her driver's license, and the parallel parking was the thing that really caused her.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, yeah. And then that was her excuse. Well, the car can parallel park itself. Why do I need to know this?
Now, I must tell you that in many European cities, where almost everybody drives little cars, like little smart cars.
Yeah.
They don't parallel park. They pull into at right angles and
Oh, yeah.
right up over the sidewalk, so they can get about 3 or 4 cars in where one parallel car park would take up the space. So they don't have to worry about parallel parking, and they just pull in. You're driving along and say, "Oh," and just turn right, and then right up over the sidewalk. It's quite astonishing.
Have you ever been in a situation, Lowell, where you're trying to pull in properly, as you've been taught to pull into a parking space when you're going to parallel park? You pull up ahead with your
Yeah.
signal on to back in. The number of times people swoop in behind you and steal that spot. Oh, my God.
I sometimes feel like I'd like to be driving a Sherman tank.
I do drive a Sherman tank, and they still do it to me.
That's right. Go ahead.
I'm okay, man, says Mariad. I can parallel park better than my hubby. Careful with the sexist statements. There you go. You're in trouble.
Oh, yeah, right.
Sean says, I can't believe how many Ottawa police cars do not have signal lights. Mike says, Quebec government hitting their anti-vaxxers where it hurts most. 6,000 people lined up to get their vaccine when they threatened their booze in pot stores. Now they want to charge them a tax. I'm not sure if I agree with this, but I can't wait to see how many line up now.
That was fascinating. Yeah, I'm not going to get a vaccine. It's just a microchip. It's just the government trying to control me, and it's too dangerous, etc., etc. And then when they find out they can't buy booze without the vaccine, oh, I'm going to line up for this, baby. By the way, talking about pot stores, did you see the story? We're going to have 40 more pot stores in Ottawa. I mean, they're closing restaurants, they're closing businesses everywhere, but the pots, we're going to have 40 more. So you know what's going to happen, folks? About almost every restaurant's going to shut down and be replaced by a pot store.
But if you go to the pot store and use it as intended, you'll need the restaurant after. You'll have the munchies.
Well, you obviously know what I don't. So go ahead.
I've read a thing or two, Lowell. After hearing the announcement from the province on changing the road test, coming soon, new episode of Canada's Worst Driver, says Cheryl. Patricia, removing driving test items, these require you to use your turn signal. Lori says, it's the slow drivers on the Queensway that are the hazard. I never have to parallel park during my test. Have to be a good driver all my life. Dean says, read Anthony Fury's column in The Sun. A lot of hospital problems have to do with bureaucracy and stupid policies and poor treatment of nurses. COVID is not always.
Well, actually, if you'd listened to the Lowell Green Show for the past 2 or 3 days, you would have heard exactly the same thing. The problem is not COVID. The problem is decades of poor administration, perhaps some underfunding, total incompetence. And once again, and it's amazing to me that the media is not picking up on this. I dealt with this yesterday. For something like 15, 20 years, we have been trying to get hospitals to fix this problem of ambulances backing up. And it still exists even today at the Civic and the General, okay? So the rule today is you come in with your patient, there's 2 paramedics per ambulance. So you come in and you got to stay with the patient in the hospital, generally speaking, in a corridor until the patient is admitted. These days, that can take hours. So you've got this ambulance comes in, 2 paramedics standing there waiting. Another ambulance comes in, 2 more paramedics waiting, for hours. Another ambulance comes in. At one point, I went back in the record. At one point, the Ottawa Citizen reported that at the Civic Hospital, this was in 2018, the Civic Hospital, there were 10 ambulances and 20 paramedics in the hallways waiting for their patients to be admitted. And I and several others said, well, just get a nurse to do, let the ambulances go back out onto the road. So finally, this is what I call just total incompetence. Couldn't figure this out. Finally, at the Queensway Hospital, I said, you know what? We're just going to have 1 paramedic there, and he or she will be able to handle 2 or 3 ambulances coming in. And so we can let the paramedics and the ambulance back out onto the road. And right now in Toronto, I don't know if you've been following this, John, but in Toronto, there are periods now when there are no ambulances available.
Yeah.
And one of the major reasons is you've probably had some of these Toronto hospitals got 5, 10, 15 ambulances, 10, 15, 20 paramedics lined up waiting for their patients to be admitted because they can't figure out how to put a nurse or somebody else to look after them while the ambulances go back out. I mean, You wonder why our healthcare is in such disarray. Well, that kind of administration is a good example of it. We're paying these people four, five, $600,000 a year to figure things like this out. A 5-year-old could figure it out, but apparently hospital administrators can't. There's my rant on that one. Go ahead.
Well, as I mentioned yesterday on the show, Ottawa was in a bit of a similar predicament on the weekend. If you had an emergency in Ottawa, they had to call paramedics in from Gananoque. Can you
Yeah.
imagine being in an accident, on the Queensway at Carling, and you're waiting on a paramedic to get here from Gananoque?
Well, and what, 2 or 3 months ago, I'm taken in by ambulance to Queensway Carleton, and there must have been, I guess, 3 or 4 ambulances, which would mean there would be 6 or 8 paramedics in there waiting. I mean, come on. I mean, get somebody else in there, a nurse or a doctor or whatever it is, to look after the patients. Let the ambulances back out again. They can't figure out simple things like this.
Hey, well,
Sorry.
what's the purpose of the paramedic having to stay with the patient?
Because the paramedic has the information on the ride. I mean, I've done this 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
So they've taken information, their heart rate and so forth. But that's all available. I mean, it's all computerized. So anybody could all you have to do, if you're a nurse and you know how to read that computer, they bring in, here's the patient here, he's got the heart or whatever it is. Here's the information, there's the computer. So I mean, the nurse can handle it just as well as the paramedic, for God's sake. But they can't seem to figure.
Yeah. Sorry, that seems to me to be a great job to give a paramedic student or a nursing student.
A full-time nurse, I think. But in the case of the Queensway Carleton, I said, you know what? We're going to leave a paramedic here to look after 2 or 3 ambulances. More than that, we'll have to get a couple. But I mean, this is just, to me, this is elemental. Shields. Shields. I'll get this straight here. I'm in a rambling mood today. Folks, I know many of you people agree with me that if you can, shop local, whether it's a restaurant, hardware store, whatever it is, shop local. We've said this before, the big box stores are going to do just fine. In fact, in many cases, sadly, the big box stores have benefited. Okay, they've closed many of the smaller stores. The big box stores are doing very well, better than most. And so if you can find a local dealer like Shields in Pakenham who can provide the same product for the same price or even a better price and better service, please deal with the local. Shields is one since 1947. They have a wonderful reputation, great people. They have a huge warehouse, so they've got all of the appliances you could possibly need in stock, so there's no delay. And yet, I still hear people saying, "Well, I'm going to go to Big Bad Boy or whatever the hell it is." Okay, that's your right. But if you really want to support local, then support local. And nobody is more local than Shields. Nobody can give you a better deal, friendlier service, and nobody else can give you a couple of free steaks with a major appliance than Shields. Shields.ca. Go ahead, John, please.
Let's get some text going here. 613-413-2217. This comes from someone in Calgary. Stop bubble wrapping the kids. Get them back. My daughter just came back to Canada after studying abroad for 5 months. It was great. Let me see. I have a tire valve tool, which works great. Good on cars that steal your parking spot. Lowell, we have about 10 pot stores in Orleans. Stay smoky, says Jason. Let me see here. Eileen says, I agree. 70-30. I listened to your show for years. I remember you getting after women to phone in. I never had the time. I was driving the kids someplace, doing washing, scrubbing floors, listening to the show while working my ass off.
Do women still scrub floors?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Well, there's Debbie again. Yes. Oh, I'm scrubbing mine as soon as we're done here, so it evens things out.
I bought my wife a Swiffer. We have.
No, you did not.
Yes, I did. Well, actually, she bought it for herself, and I put it together. Okay.
All right.
But she still prefers in the kitchen to get down on her hands and knees and swab the floor by hand. Can never figure it out. Here is a Swiffer here. You just go around, push it around, etc. But in her mind, it doesn't do the same job.
I agree with John. I agree.
Okay.
Keenan says, if pot stores start selling poutine, that'll be a total of 90% of restaurants. Okay. Lori says, happened to me, Lowell. I was in the Heart Institute waiting in the hall with 2 paramedics standing by me. I was astonished. I was in front of a desk with nurses. Darlene says, I was in hospital and paramedics stayed with me until they brought me in the room. It also wasn't busy like they say it is. I just don't get it. Nina says, government makes more money from pot shops than they do from restaurants.
Wait a
Chrissy
minute.
says,
No, we have a government. Only a government could lose money selling pot, but we have a government that manages to do it. Okay, go
a hell
ahead.
of a point. It's a hell of a point, Lowell Green.
Yeah.
You make a lot of good points. That's right up there. I heard some hospitals are going to bring back unvaccinated staff because of the shortage, but don't quote me on this, says Chrissy. Let's go to email, lowell@blasttheradio.com. Lisa, thanks for your email. She says, Lowell, a good solution to the healthcare crisis and homeless problem would be to claw back government employees' index pensions by keeping them in line with those who are on welfare and disability payments. The money saved would improve healthcare and build affordable housing. And
Actually, folks, and I keep pressing this, and it doesn't seem to be registering yet. The fact of the matter is that the emphasis in the past number of years, 10, 12 years, has not been on healthcare. It has been on green energy. This country, and in fact, many countries around the world, in Canada, let's talk about it. We have spent, it is now estimated, I have some new figures, close to in the past 10 years, about $100 billion trying to install green energy of various kinds. This includes buying electric buses rather than diesel buses, twice as expensive as we're doing here, going to light rail. I mean, in Ontario alone, the two auditor generals have told us, this was 2 or 3 years ago, that we had spent at that point $9.3 billion more for electricity because of green energy than we needed to. So just think, if we had spent even a fraction of the money that we have spent on green energy, if we had spent a fraction of that improving healthcare, we would not have the problems we have today. We would not have lockdowns. I wouldn't be asking about going back to school. They'd be back in school. This has been the problem. The emphasis, and even today, the emphasis is still on global warming, lowering CO2 emissions. On April the 1st, with all of the high costs that we have today, energy poverty, etc., etc., on April 1st, our prime minister deliberately will increase the cost of living dramatically. He will add 11 cents a liter to the price of gasoline and natural gas, etc., and diesel fuel, etc., which means that the cost of everything, food, clothing, everything, will once again skyrocket. And this is not in any way to help healthcare, which is what we need. This is to try and force us to lower CO2 emissions. Among other things, I don't know if you realize this or not, but this, among other things, carbon tax is highly discriminatory against people who live in the north, against people who live in rural areas, and against farmers. Farmers have got to spend all the extra carbon tax tilling the soil, harvesting the soil, harvesting the crop, trucking the crop to market, and in many cases, the extra cost of having to heat and ventilate their barns and to dry their grain. It's unbelievable. And if you're in a rural area, I mean, if you live in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, do you think that you'll be able to have public transit? I don't know if they have a bus. They're not likely. But certainly, I mean, there are people well, I don't have a bus here. So I have to drive. My wife has to drive. We don't have bus service. And that includes everybody in the rural area. So this is highly discriminatory against people who do not live in large metro areas. The cost for people living in the north, in rural areas, on farms, is astronomically higher than the cost would be for carbon tax for people in downtown Toronto. That's a fact. It's highly discriminatory, among many other things. John, we're almost out of time here. Give me a couple more texts here.
Sure. Rob in Carlton Place emails in to say the teachers union stands on the exact opposite of whatever Doug Ford happens to be doing. I ignore them. Send the kids back to school. It's hard enough for them to get a good education.
Yeah, they're going back on Monday. I hope you agree.
Here's a text. Your car is big and heavy. Learning to control this monster properly by parking, three-point turns, and signaling can give you a good perception of the space it takes up on the road and therefore keeps it from hitting others. A defensive driving course is even better.
Let me ask you this, though, in all seriousness. How many accidents are caused by cars trying to three-point turn? How many accidents are caused by cars trying to parallel park? That's not the problem. The accidents almost inevitably are caused by people who know the rules, pass the driving test by performing all of the rules, but choose to ignore them. Run a red light, you know you're supposed to stop, you know you're supposed to signal, but many people don't. Simple as that, in my opinion. By the way, when I've talked about all the billions and billions of dollars we have poured into green energy, at 1 o'clock today, wind and solar were providing us, wait a minute, at 8 o'clock this morning, I checked, wind and solar were providing us with 4% of all of our needs. At 1 p.m., the wind is really whipping up. At 1 p.m., wind and solar was producing 9% of our needs. So we have 91% of all of our needs as of right now here in Ontario provided by something other than green energy. For this, we have spent billions. We have robbed our hospitals. We have robbed our healthcare system for what? To provide us on the best of all days. The sun is shining beautifully, the wind is blowing perfectly, and we still can't get 10% of our needs from all that we have poured into green energy. That's the problem, folks. We've got to change the emphasis. If we fix our healthcare, get the healthcare system working so it can handle a little bit of a blip, then at that point, then we can worry about lowering emissions, okay? Is that fair? Thank you. We'll be back.
The Lowell Green Show is seen and heard live around the world at 2 p.m. Eastern. Connect with us online at blasttheradio.com/Lowell Green. Can't join us live? Download the Lowell Green podcast. Available on Apple, Spotify, Google, and more. Ask your smart speaker to play the Lowell Green podcast. This is a production of blasttheradio.com.